Once, ships sailed across the bright surface of the Aral Sea, carrying fishermen, families, goods, and hopes. The water stretched as far as the eye could see, full of fish, wind, and waves. But in just a few decades, that sea disappeared, leaving behind rusting ships, dusty desert, and a silent cry carried by the sand. This is the story of a sea that vanished, a region that was broken, and a world that hardly noticed. The Aral Sea was once the fourth largest inland body of water on Earth, a vast oasis in Central Asia nestled between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. For centuries, it sustained vibrant communities. Fishing towns flourished along its shores. Markets bustled with fresh catch. Children played by the water. The sea gave life, and life gave thanks. But everything was about to change. In the 1960s, the Soviet Union started one of the biggest farming projects in history. They called it a miracle of engineering. They called it progress. In Uzbekistan, every September, something unusual happened. While children in other parts of the world sharpened pencils and opened textbooks to begin the school year, Uzbek children started theirs not in classrooms, but in cotton fields. Students returned from break only to be sent into the arid fields to harvest cotton by hand. It wasn't optional. Their parents weren't asked. For up to 2 months, children, depending on their age, were required to pick between 20 and 60 kilograms of cotton each day. If they didn't meet the target, they were shamed in front of the class. Some children, too embarrassed to return, hid in sheds filled with farm tools and animals. And it wasn't just kids. Every year, around 2 million people were sent to pick cotton, about 500,000 of them by force. The goal was to turn Central Asia into a cotton empire. They called it white gold. To do it, they needed water, vast quantities of it. So, they diverted the 2 great rivers that fed the Aral Sea, the Amu Darya and the Sir Darya. They dug canals, some of which were so inefficient that nearly half the water simply evaporated or seeped into the ground. No one asked what would happen to the sea. And so, slowly, steadily, the Aral Sea began to shrink. At first, the changes were easy to ignore. A slight drop in water levels, a bit more salt in the air. But by the 1970s, the shoreline had pulled back by miles. Fish began to die, unable to survive in the increasingly salty water. Fishing boats were left stranded on dry land, and once busy harbors turned into lifeless dust bowls. Still, the irrigation continued. By the 1980s, entire industries began to collapse. The fishing industry, once the backbone of the region, vanished almost overnight. Fish processing plants, canneries, and shipping operations shut down. In some areas, even agriculture began to suffer as the soil grew too salty to sustain crops. Tens of thousands of people lost their livelihoods. By the 1990s, the southern half of the sea had nearly vanished. The exposed seabed stretched for hundreds of kilometers, leaving ships marooned in a desert that had once been ocean. What remained was a toxic wasteland called the Aral Desert. Now bare and dry, the former seabed became a source of deadly dust storms. Winds swept across the salt-covered ground, picking up pesticides and chemicals and carrying them into nearby towns and villages. Respiratory illnesses soared. Cancer rates climbed. Children were born with serious birth defects. The sea was gone, but the damage it left behind still haunts the people who lived around it. Town after town fell silent. What once were fishing ports now stood dozens of kilometers from the water. Schools, homes, hospitals, all abandoned or left crumbling under the weight of sand and despair. The economy withered. Families fled. The world turned its gaze elsewhere. There was no international outcry, no emergency summit. Unlike Chernobyl or Bhopal, the Aral Sea's death happened without an explosion. It vanished like breath in the wind, in silence. The world forgot. Yet amid the devastation, a flicker of hope appeared. In the early 2000s, Kazakhstan, with help from international organizations like the World Bank, took bold steps to reverse some of the damage. With their support, the Cockerell Dam was completed in 2005 at the northernmost tip of the sea. The dam reached full capacity, stabilizing the North Aral Sea. While it hasn't brought the sea back to the town of Aralsk, it has helped revive nearby communities. Nowhere was this more visible than in the small village of Tastabek, near Aralsk. In the 1990s, Tastabek had nearly vanished. Its population dropped from 90 households to just 8 as the sea receded and the fishing industry collapsed. But after the dam was built and the sea began to recover, life slowly returned. Fish stocks rebounded, and the village came back to life. By 2019, 32 households had returned, as people from other regions arrived to fish and build new lives. Tastabek became a symbol, not just of survival, but of what's possible when nature is given a chance to heal. The revival was far from complete. The southern Aral Sea remains mostly dry. The damage, in many ways, is irreversible. But the partial restoration proved something powerful, that even colossal mistakes can be met with action, with will, with care. The story of the Aral Sea is more than a regional tragedy. It is a symbol, a warning carved into salt and sand. Around the world, water systems are facing similar threats. Lake Chad is disappearing. The Colorado River is drying up. Glaciers are melting faster than ever. Climate change is making water scarcity worse, and political decisions often ignore the long-term damage to our environment. We are walking a path we've already seen. The Aral Sea didn't just vanish on its own. It was taken, bit by bit, decision by decision. And it can happen again. If we pause and listen to the silence left behind by the Aral Sea, we might hear a truth we need to remember. Water is life. And once it's gone, it does not easily return. The rusting ships still stand, stranded in a sea of sand, monuments to a world that forgot. They no longer sail, but they still speak. And we must listen.